Start the webinar. Here we go. Yes. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Brasenose College Interviewees for Science student Q&A. We're going to start in a minute. We'll just wait for the participants to come in. So we'll just wait a minute. But in case you're wondering what you strayed into, this is the Brasenose College Oxford Interviewees student Q&A. So we're going to chat to you. It's going to be quite science orientated, but as you might have seen in the email, if anyone isn't doing science but wants to join in anyway, but still has interviews at Brasenose, then it'll probably still be quite useful. So yeah, thanks very much for joining. You should all be Oxford University applicants, and you should be having at some point interviews at Brasenose. So that's what we were in. So we're going to do a very quick introduction for everyone. I think we'll do this in first name alphabetical order. So, but except for I'll say who I am first because I don't know, I'm speaking now. So my name is Joe. I work in the kind of admissions office, in the outreach office at Brasenose College. This isn't actually my own library. It's a virtual background thing that my kids put on, and I have no idea how to take it off. So my name's Joe. I'm vaguely in charge, and then all the other people are student helpers, and they're going to introduce themselves first name order, and tell us who they are, what they're studying, and where they're from. Why not? Okay.
I guess I'm first. I'm Amber. I'm a first year chemist. I'm from Surrey. Yeah, love it here as well. It's so fun.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm a first year biochemist and I'm from near Durham.
Hi, I'm Harish. I'm a second year mathematician and I'm from Reading.
Hi, I'm Oscar. I'm a first year biologist and I can't do the alphabet. Sorry, Matilda. And I'm from very South Lincolnshire near Peterborough. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Matilda. I'm a second year psychologist and I'm from Southampton. And don't worry, Oscar, I also sometimes forget the alphabet. So
hi, I'm Sam. I'm a third year medic from Manchester.
Brilliant. Yeah, I was impressed that Hannah very astutely, and perhaps maybe Harisha realised, HA, that was quite hard with the alphabet. But then I also liked it that we messed up the alphabet after that. It's unlikely to come up in the interviews. They're not likely to say, right, what letter comes after O, quick. So you don't need to know the alphabet to be an Oxford student, so don't worry. All right, so first up, what we're going to do is we're going to chat for a little bit, and then we'll do a Q&A. So we really want you to type your questions into the Q&A box, I think. If you do it in the chat box, we'll probably read it as well, but the Q&A box might be better. Tell me, somebody, if it's not enabled or something. But first, we'll just chat for a short time. So the first thing I want to say is congratulations. You've landed on your feet. You've applied to, or you've been allocated to, the best college in the whole of Oxbridge. So congratulations. That's great. The second thing I want to say, other congratulations I want to say, is you're incredible. You're amazing because you have got through to the interview stage at the University of Oxford at Brasenose College. And that is no mean feat. That's a really hard thing to do. So you're winners. So well done. That's amazing. You're going to be having interviews. At the end of those in January, we're going to tell you the outcome. It might be an offer. So we might give you a conditional offer to come study at Brasenose, come study at Oxford. It might not be, that might not happen. And I just want to say, no matter what happens during the interviews, whether you get an offer or not, you're still incredible. You're still awesome. And you're still absolutely brilliant. And you're going to go off to university and have the absolute time of your life. It might be Oxford, might be somewhere else. So if you have that mentality of just thinking, well, let's just see how it goes. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. The whole experience will be a bit more pleasant. And you just won't, or just you'll probably perform better because you've just taken the pressure off yourself a little bit. Anyway, that's my pep talk. I think what we're going to do is we're going to pad out some time to give you a chance to type in your questions, and we're just going to have a few quick fire thoughts from our amazing student helpers about their interviews, what they remember, just a little bit of detail about how they went, and then also any top tips that they've got. And I'm going to randomly pick pairs of people to do that. They'll have a go, and then I'll pick some more pairs. So I'll start with Matilda. and Sam, tell us your memories of interviews and then any tips that you've got, just briefly.
I don't know about you, Matilda, but I was incredibly nervous before starting mine. But then I remember finishing and actually being really happy and enjoying it. I actually had fun doing my interviews, which sounds really bonkers, but it was quite enjoyable. I think my biggest top tip is to not answer straight away, to give a good 10 seconds between when they ask the question and you answer it, to really think about what you want to say.
Yeah, I was also incredibly nervous before my interviews, but I think had a similar experience where like after my first one, I kind of like calmed down a bit and felt a bit better about the ones I had after that. And so just having done like one before made the ones that came after feel so much easier and yeah, so much more enjoyable. And I guess I don't really know what my like top tip would be, but maybe just a kind of like interesting way of thinking about it in terms of like helping you enjoy the interview rather than think about it as something terrifying, is that it's just an opportunity for you to have a conversation with a professional in a field that you love. And you get to have a conversation with someone who's an expert in something that you love and something that they love. And so it's kind of just an opportunity for a really interesting conversation. And also the interviewers are not trying to make you fail. They are, anything that they do, anything that they say, even if it feels like they're sort of putting you down or telling you that you're wrong, which they won't do, but sometimes it can feel like that, is just them trying to get the best answers out of you. Like they want you to succeed in the interview. So yeah, just a couple kind of positive spins on it. Basically try and keep as positive a mindset as possible with every aspect of the interview is probably like my top tip.
Marvelous, that's great. So Amber and Oscar, do you want to go next? And you can tell us your tips, but maybe also just tell us a bit about the kind of, I don't know, when the screen turned on and the tutors started talking, what kind of stuff did they ask? Maybe you could mention that as well.
So I remember in my first one, I was very nervous, just like everyone else was. I didn't really know exactly what to expect. But it was really welcoming, and they introduced themselves at first, which I think helped me sort of, relax. But I think if they'd gone straight into questions, I might have struggled. But there's time to sort of settle down. They introduced themselves, what they're going to do. So that really does help put you at ease a bit. And then they go into questions, and really it goes very quickly because you're quite focused on what's going on, and it does go by in a flash. And once you're done, it's really nice just to look back and have a think, because if you like problem solving and puzzles, it's a really good way just for half an hour or so just to think really in depth about a subject you enjoy, which, although kind of stressful at the time, it's actually quite rewarding. And looking back, it's quite nice to have just think about what you've been asked and how you answered, and yeah, just really think about the puzzles, because ultimately in a way that is quite enjoyable and quite fun. So yeah, make sure you try and relax as much as you can and sort of get settled to help calm any nerves you might have, but really just try and enjoy the process, because you'll think much better if you do.
I'll say a little bit about my interviews. So I signed on, and I think the link to the Miro just was being so annoying. The Miro is the online whiteboard. I think they're still online this year, right, Joe?
Yeah, so they're all online, and I think chemistry and maybe maths are using this Miro or Miro thing, so it's this online whiteboard, which so most of you won't have to bother with that, but yeah, so it's just a minority of people that will be engaging in the joys of Miro.
Yeah, so I would definitely practice that if you have to use it, like practice using it, try it out, because it can be quite weird, just in general. And it was really awkward because there was just like moments of silence when I was trying to get this link to work. But yeah, the tutors are so friendly. Don't be scared of them.
Outstanding. So we're going to get Harish and Hannah to comment in a minute, but I just want to say there's not that many questions in the Q&A box, so we might have even more awkward silences, which may be reminiscent of your interviews in a bit, because we're not going to have much to ask. So please do type stuff in, ask everything that you want to ask. We don't want you to leave this session thinking, oh, I wish I'd asked this. So please do just type in. There's no stupid questions. There's no questions that are too long-winded or too simple. Just type it all in, get it all off your chest. And then we can answer it later. Right, so Harish and Hannah, maybe Harish first, then Hannah. Let's hear your kind of memories or tips or whatever you want, really.
Yeah, so I had a fair few. I think I had four, which is more than expected. And I was told about three of them in advance. And then after my first interview, they told me that I had one tomorrow. So one day afterwards. Yeah, I was like insanely nervous for them. And like I was not excited for them. I think I kind of enjoyed the first one was quite interesting, but no, I did not enjoy the second one at all. It was absolutely awful. But I think what a common thing is that most people tend to feel like they did worse on the interview than they actually were. Or if you feel like it went amazing, then it may have actually went amazing. I think the main point is that it's really impossible for us to really tell how well you performed on the interview. I think kind of the key strategy that I think helped me was that even so, if they asked me a question and then I had zero clue what the answer actually was, then I would still try and toss an idea out there, because I think that is kind of what they're trying to search for, is a person who can work with them. And then even if you toss out an idea which just makes absolutely no sense, then it just provides a way for the interviewer to kind of say, oh, that's not particularly right, how about we consider like a whole other approach. Or if your idea has got a bit of merit to it, then they'll try and work through that. Like, I think the objective is not at all to try and reach the correct answer. It's just more so trying to be taught well, because that is kind of what they're always trying to search for. They're not trying to search for the smartest people. I think if you're at the interview stage, you're probably way smart enough. It's just more, are you teachable enough? And it's, can they work with you? And if they were to provide you with a few hints, like, are you able to respond well to them? And then if you are able to, then I think that is probably a mark of an interview that went well. But yeah, I think one other like main thing which I'll come back to is just it's kind of impossible to tell how your interviews went. I thought mine went absolutely awful, and then I got in. My mate had three, thought that they went amazing, but then he unfortunately did not make it in. So I think it's kind of hard to tell. So after the interviews, try not to really think / concern yourself about it too much. But yeah.
Yeah, I was also really nervous for mine. I think that's a common feeling and totally normal. You do, as the interview progresses, you get more relaxed about it. You don't remain as nervous the entire time. I also thought after mine that I'd kind of done a bit of a bad job, to be honest. But obviously I did like well enough. For my interview, I had pre-reading before my interviews. For the Brasenose one, it was like an hour before I got through some written text to kind of read over, and that kind of formed the basis of the beginning of my interview. I've seen that in the Q&A, someone's asked about how in-depth questions were, like if I got any about my personal statement. In my Brasenose one, I didn't get any questions about my personal statement. And in my other interview, they only asked me what I'd done since that I hadn't included. So maybe make sure that you've read something or know something more than you've put on your personal statement, because that would probably be quite an embarrassing moment. Yeah, I think that it's really key to just remember that they're not trying to trip you up. If you don't understand what they've asked you, like, do ask them to clarify or maybe try and reword it. They do want to help you. They want you to kind of give the best answer that you can. Yeah, I think also just like remember that they're not that scary. They really are just like, they're going to be kind of your tutors if you make it. And you'll see them loads and they're really pretty chill.
Marvelous. So that's a great set of advice. I hope that's good for everyone, and that probably answers a lot of your questions, to be honest. But meanwhile, there's been an explosion in the Q&A box, so we're going to have a look through at these questions now. I think I'll probably just like get a couple of one or maybe two students to comment maybe. But yeah, the personal statement thing, that gets so much. So many people ask about that. I think that there's this kind of myth that all Oxford or Cambridge interviews are just basically interrogating you about the personal statement. But actually, on the whole, I reckon, well, there's a very good chance they won't ask you about personal statements at all. So let's have a little straw poll. I think Hannah said she was asked about it. Hands up for the rest of you if you were asked about your personal statement at all in your interview. Oscar's done his electronically and physically. I like that. Actually, so most of you were. So let's ask, but you might not be. Let's go for Oscar. Matilda, I think. Did you put your hand up, Matilda? Okay. Oscar, Matilda, tell us, what did they ask about your personal statement, if you can remember?
So in my Brasenose one, they touched on it very briefly at the end, I think. I'd done a small bit of work experience at the Open University, and they just essentially asked, so what did I learn from that? And then I had 2 more interviews, both at Pembroke, and they asked a lot more sort of in depth, not really about any reading I'd done, because I mentioned a bit of reading, more about sort of the experiences I'd had, so the work experience I did. So they sort of wanted to know what I'd essentially got out of them, or what I'd learned kind of in terms of experience. So if you've done any sort of work experience stuff, it'd be good to sort of think about what your big takeaways were from that, and how you benefited from what you did.
So it was kind of similar for me, that like I did get asked about my personal statement, but it didn't form like the basis of any of my interviews. So I had 1 interview with Maudlin and then 2 with Brasenose. And the 2 with Brasenose, for psychology, you always have 2, because you have one that's like a psychology interview and one that's a philosophy interview, which seems kind of random because I don't do philosophy. Like, you can do both, but I don't do philosophy. So that had nothing to do with psychology, nothing to do with my personal statement. But then the psychology one was sort of split into 2 halves, where the first half I was like given a sort of research scenario to like read beforehand, and then was asked questions about that. And then the second half, they asked me about my personal statement. And so they picked out something that I had written about, and sort of just asked me more questions about it, about like, say you did XYZ with this in an experiment, then like how could you what like conclusions could you draw from it and stuff like that. So it was kind of, yeah, it was a like taking what I talked about in my personal statement but then bringing it into a new context. But also with my like personal statement, they initially asked me a question about my personal statement, and I kind of couldn't quite remember like what it was I'd written about and what the kind of like basis of what I'd written about was. So then my interviewer said, okay, I'm not going to ask you about that, I'll pick something else. And so that's what I mean by like the interviewers want you to succeed. He realized that I wouldn't be able to give good like enough of like answers about that aspect of my personal statement, so he asked me about something else instead, so that we could like continue the conversation. So don't be like me, know your personal statement well and make sure that you know about everything that you wrote about, but generally interviewers will be understanding if you can't remember every single thing you wrote about in your personal statement, because you wrote them quite a while ago now. When did they have to be handed in? Like early October? That's like ages ago now. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, so you might get asked, you might not. Don't see it as a bad thing if you haven't. But yeah, it's not like interrogating you about the detail. It's a bit more, it'll be the beginning of a discussion that goes somewhere. So there's loads of questions now, and I would ask all of the panel, if that's okay, have a look, see if there's any specific to your subject. Some people are saying, hey, Amber, ... So yeah, answer those ones if you can, and everyone else. But then I'll try and look for themes, and one of the themes is about preparation. Some people are saying, how do you prepare for interviews? Generally, I would say we don't expect any specific preparation. We're not like, why haven't you read, Selfish Gene or something like that? So it's not going to be like that. But I don't know, there might be some comments that some of the helpers have about preparation. So Harish and Sam, do you want to tell us what you did, if you did any preparation? It could be reading, it could be other stuff. While you're thinking about that, though, sorry, Sam, I just got a bit of technical detail. So some of you are asking about Miro, whether your subject needs Miro or not. So engineering, chemistry, and physics use Miro. Have I said them all? But engineering and chemistry, my admissions officer will give you a link by email. But physics, they just give you the link during the interview, so you just click on it in the interview. So those will all be fine. Maths, they don't ask you to use Miro. They just get you to hold up a bit of paper because they're like super on top of the technicals. So that's a bit of detail about that for you. Okay, so Harish and Sam, I think you unmuted first. Do you want to tell us about any kind of preparation tips or anything that you'd recommend doing?
I think preparation for a medicine interview at Oxford is like really bizarre because you prepare for the interview structures at all of the universities, which are very much like MMI, act out this piece, drama, all that sort of stuff. Whereas medicine at Oxford is very science focused. So I panicked quite a bit about what to do. But the best advice I had was just to talk to someone about anything to do with science. So I ended up sitting down with my biology teacher and I just went through my EPQ, which I wasn't prepared that would come up in my interview. I just thought that's something I could talk about in science. That's basically what a tutorial is for medicine. Is basically they sit you down and they just ask you have a discussion about like recent research or something like that, and try and take the discussion as far as you can. And so I think that was the best way for me to prepare. Also, the graph questions are quite common, especially for medicine, where they might give you a graph and then they go, talk to me about it. And so I also practice that about going like describe the axis first before then launching thinking about what it could say, thinking about maybe the biological meaning behind that graph, thinking about what experiments it came from, what the limitations of those experiments are, and then how you can move them further. So there's lots of things that you can kind of practice at without knowing what's going to come up. So just really have an idea of just practice speaking about science, because the tutors will guide you through a conversation. But if you have like, even if you talk to your parents about it, I think that's really useful.
Yeah, like I think that like last point, like I just talked to my parents about random maths problems. They would have absolutely zero clue what on earth I was talking about. But I think the actual main kind of attribute which they're testing at the Oxford interview is kind of how well can you talk through what your line of reasoning is, just because that's kind of the core skill of how the tutorials work here is can you kind of talk through how what your approach is, and can you try and argue your case for it kind of, while also if the tutors try to help you or present you with any new information or any hints or anything, can you kind of adapt your approach? So I found like, so I went through some more maths questions, which is a maths admissions test. And then, because like, it's all kind of the same kind of problem solving skills. And then, so I would just kind of solve them, but I tried to talk out loud and try to really explain what was running through my mind while I was trying to work through those problems. I went through step problems as well, which is the admissions test for Cambridge maths. So I would kind of talk through those ones. Yeah, like I would just kind of talk to anyone who would pay attention to me, and then I just try to speak through my what my approach was, or if not, I would just talk to myself as well. Like I would just say the kind of skill set of just being able to talk through it is just incredibly important. Like even if you're the smartest person, if you're just answering every question without really speaking to them, that like they probably won't want to teach you, because there will come a point where it will just become too hard, and then they're not able to really help you if you're not able to really work with if you're not able to work with them. So yeah, I'd say being able to kind of make sure that you're comfortable talking through your thought process, which I think can be a bit more tough for if you're taking a STEM course, like especially like a more quantitative one. It's not really one which you're like, it's not really like normally a talk out loud kind of course, but I'd say try and practice those particular skills. They're incredibly important.
Outstanding. Thanks very much for that. So there's lots of kind of subject specific questions in the Q&A. So yeah, just to reiterate, everyone have scan through and see if there's specific ones you can type answers to, because we've got loads of questions, which is great. We want inquisitive people. But again, I'm just going to kind of look for some themes that several people have asked about and get you to answer. I'm going to do a couple of quick ones actually. One, so from Matthew, and nice to hear from you again, Matthew. Will we find out the names of our interviewers, sorry, in advance of our interviews? I think we often tell you. So quick straw poll, who knew the names of their interviewers before you were interviewed? Everyone except poor Sam. I'm sorry, we didn't tell you. So yeah, we normally tell you. I think Matthew is applying for medicine, so sorry about that, Matthew. But you can Google the tutors at Brasenose, because it will mainly be the tutors that will interview you. Sometimes for medicine they get like, you know, a clinical doctor to come in and help with interviews, but the main ones will be, you know, Samira, William, and Dr. Dennis probably. So you can Google them if you like. Then how do interviews usually end? Well, they quite often say thanks very much indeed, goodbye, but they might also say thanks very much indeed, do you have any questions? So hands up, did anyone get that question at the end? Do you have any questions? Okay, so Hannah and Sam, perhaps you could answer this. How did you ask? Did you say anything, or did you just say no thanks, bye? What happened?
I mean, in my case, I said that I didn't have any questions. I guess it's one of those things where if you don't really have anything genuinely you want to know, why would you? And maybe try and make sure that you don't answer something that you could have like easily found out, like about the course or something, just by like looking at the website. I'd suggest trying to avoid that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Sam, what happened with you?
I didn't ask a question. It was kind of more rushed. It'd been like, oh, we're over time. Do you have any questions? And I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, goodbye. But it's completely fine not to ask a question, and it's completely fine to ask a question.
Did anyone ask a question at the end? Go on then, Matilda, tell us.
So I asked a question at the end of one of my interviews. How one of my interviews ended was that I had such poor internet connection that it just kind of dropped out about 5 minutes before it was supposed to end. But if that happens, don't worry about it. But another one I asked, because you get interviewed with 2 different colleges, I asked if there's any sort of difference in like how studying the course works depending on what college you're in. Which is kind of like something that you can kind of find out from Googling things, but I just wasn't 100% sure about it. And that was just a genuine question that I had. I didn't have any questions about like what we talked about or something like specific to like the content. So like you can ask like practical questions like that as well. And then I got my answer, which was no, there's no difference. You just might, depending on what tutors there are at different colleges, they have different specific interests, and then whoever your tutor is, you might get priority for their advanced options later on. So yeah, it wasn't a particularly interesting question, and they don't really care that much whether or not you ask a question. So you only really need to ask one if you do genuinely like have something that you want answered.
Yeah, we actually stopped the interview before. If they say, do you have any questions? The interview stopped at that stage, and it's genuinely just to see if you've got anything. And most people say no, thank you. But there are some people who kind of like think it's a strategy. I'm going to ask a question. It shows I'm inquisitive. And I've told some of you this before, but I once had a friend who was at Cambridge who she did ask a question at the end, and she thought it would be a good strategy, and she kind of got nervous and accidentally kind of said, basically sounded like she was asking the tutors on a date. Because she was kind of asking them when did they finish, when did they knock off, kind of thing. So anyway, that was really funny. But don't do that. And just if you've genuinely got a question to ask, probably something from the interview, then go for it. But so Abigail, who's asked that question, just don't worry about thinking what a good question is. A couple of other quick things. You definitely don't need to do mock interviews to succeed in a real interview. So that's a myth. Some of your schools will help you organise them. In some cases, I came to your school and we did some stuff. But definitely don't need to. When I emailed you, I put a link into those YouTube videos, or the videos that we did with Cambridge, and they're like kind of interview workshops you can watch. So that's fine. But yeah, don't think that you have to do a mock interview. Okay, so yeah, so quite a few people, Hannah, are asking what were your tips for the pre-reading, like the kind of how you read it and whether you took notes, whether you kind of used a series of highlighters, or what did you do? Biochemistry is, I think, the only science subject where there is some pre-reading at Brasenose anyway, so no one else has to worry about it. But do you just want to say, is there any kind of tactics you would advise that you found useful?
Yeah, sure. So I had two interviews, so one at Brasenose and one at Univ. And for my Univ one, they gave me some kind of tasks to do with the pre-reading before we started. But I think that kind of some of those thoughts will be useful for ones, even if they don't necessarily tell you, because most of the time they don't really tell you what they want you to do with this piece of text. So I got asked to like think about how to like summarize it. So I think that's good if you can kind of think about what are the key concepts of what this is like talking to you about. I think as well, I personally printed them off and highlighted them, but that's very much like a personal preference thing. It's however you're best going to kind of take in that information. I kind of did annotations with stuff that I kind of could link things to or didn't understand in some cases. Yeah, I think it can be quite a daunting bit before the interview kind of sat with your like text and you're not really sure what they're going to ask you about it. I kind of wouldn't stress too much about it. There was kind of a few questions that were like specific to the text, but a lot of the time they were then going to talk about kind of more key concepts that kind of were to do with that text, like protein folding or enzyme inhibition, where it wasn't necessarily that was talked about in detail in what they'd given you.
That's great. Thank you very much. So there's loads more questions. We'll try and get through as many as possible. A question that some people, well, Tallulah is asking, is whether you did your interviews at home or at school, and whether you'd have any advice about that. So I don't know who hasn't spoken recently. Oscar and Amber, where did you do yours, and do you have any kind of regrets about where you did it?
I went home to do mine because I wasn't sure. I was more comfortable with my computer at home and how that all worked, and I didn't know whether the school would have, the right things I needed, or kind of a monitor I could use to make it big and stuff. So I just wanted to know that everything would be there and sort of how I'd seen it before. So I wasn't, because I was already quite stressed, so I didn't want to add to the stress by using a whole different setup I'd never seen. So that's why I did it at home. But the school was more than prepared to equip me there. So that's not something to stress about overly. Just be where you'll feel comfortable and where you think you'll be most relaxed would be my recommendation if that's an option available to you.
Yeah, I did mine at home as well. I thought that going to school would make me really stressed out and I didn't really want to talk to anyone the day of. So I just had a really chill morning, chill afternoon after my interviews, just to kind of like relax after being like so nervous.
Great. There are some questions actually about how to cope with nerves, because you've all said you're nervous. So does anyone have any advice, any kind of, self-help, any yoga, anything you'd recommend? Harish, do you want to go? And then Oscar, do you want to add?
Yeah, like when I took my interviews, I was also just like a tiny bit stressed because like 2 hours after my last interview ended, my history coursework was also in. So I was just like really, really stressed. But my main strategy was that I would just set aside the last 1 hour before each of my interviews, and I would just walk to like the park near me, and then I just walk out into the countryside, and then I would just come back, and then like I don't think I really spoke to anyone, and then I'd make myself a hot chocolate when I came home, and then I just have that with me just for the interview. But yeah, I just feel like trying to get into like a bit of a routine and then just trying to calm yourself down is always worth it.
Yeah, so what I did before and after each interview, I went for a quick walk. I lived in the countryside, so that was quite easy and nice and relaxing. And during the interview, I made sure I had a glass of water, not because I was particularly thirsty or anything, but I thought every time if they ask a question or I'm feeling stressed, it'll just give me an excuse to pause and collect my thoughts and think, because I think being able to pause and just take a step back for even if it's just a second while you're stressed in the interview, is a really good time is to have a quick think and make sure you are feeling relaxed before you answer the next question. Because I think much better, and I think most people think much better when they're nice and calm. So that'd be my tip.
I actually had Vimto in my interview when I kept on drinking it when I was nervous. And one of the interviewers, when they saw me the first time back, they said they called me Ribena boy throughout that like the deciding phase, because they thought it was Ribena, and that's how they just like remembered me.
I love that. We promise we don't make up any offensive names about our candidates, but Ribena boy, I mean, I think that's pretty nice. That's a nice name. I might start calling you that now. Great. Does anyone else have any kind of self-help, how to deal with nerves? Because it is something you all mentioned. Is there any other kind of bits and pieces about that? Just unmute.
I think the first interview actually helped a lot. So I was quite lucky that my other college, Pembroke, did mine on the Friday, and both my Brasenose ones were on the Monday. And after the first one, it was just so much easier to do the Monday ones. So once you got it done, you're in the role of it. It'll be over before you know. So I think it's just getting there and like pressing the start button, and then when you're there, it's just there. But yeah, that was how I dealt with it, kind of.
Someone said, "Can I drink in the interview?" And it seems you can. That's because Sam was drinking Vimto. So yeah, definitely you're okay to chug on water or whatever you like. Sorry, Matilda.
I was just going to say another thing sort of about nerves. This kind of applies more for like once you've had like your first interview. But if you've got like more than one, especially like more than two as well, I think it's really important to try and kind of like put whatever happened in the interview you've just had behind you and have some kind of way to have just like a reset. So like for me, my first interview, I really wasn't happy with how it went, and it would have been really easy for me to kind of like spiral and go, oh no, well, I've ruined it, I've got no chance of getting in now, like there's, you know, and got really in my head and then worked myself up and got even more nervous for the ones the day after. It's really normal to come out of the interview and either not know how it went or feel like it didn't go well, but that's not, as kind of like has already been said, that doesn't necessarily indicate how well it actually went. But it is normal to come out of it and not necessarily feel positive. So it's really important to be able to put that to one side when you go to your next interview and be able to be like, this is, you know, this is a new opportunity. This is a different interview with different people talking, you know, it's going to be a new experience, and not dwelling on whatever has already happened, because that's done and that interview is over. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that you're approaching each like interview that you have as, you know, refreshed from whatever has happened before.
Yeah, that's great advice. Someone's saying, Kate's saying, are there any example questions that we can get hold of? And I've just put a link to a kind of our webpage that has the Oxford webpage that's got some questions, some videos, and some other stuff. So that might get you thinking, if you like. All right, so I bet because there's no geography students here today, there's a few questions about what might a geography interview look like. So just so you know, certainly at Brasenose, what they have tended to do in previous years, and I think they're doing it again, is they kind of have a human and a physical geographer together in the room, and then they do another interview afterwards with again a human and a physical geographer. So they kind of your two interviews will be a mix of physical and human. Alternatively, what they might do is have the two physical geographers in a room at once, and then the two human geographers in the room for the second interview. So you might have one physical, one human, or it might be a kind of mix. But whatever, you don't need to worry, it'll be fine. But it's definitely this idea of mixing. You know, we're definitely looking at both the physical and the human side of geography, and we always expect candidates to kind of have a favorite out of the two. So that's fine. But yeah, like we really want people who are interested in both types, at least initially. So have a think about that. There's quite a lot of questions about the structure of interviews. Quite a lot of those are about medicine. But maybe I'll just pick on a couple of people, starting with Sam, and then just trying to think who else hasn't said anything for a while. I feel like Hannah's already kind of said her structure a little bit. Amber. So Sam and Amber, do you want to tell us, how you felt your interview was structured? You might not have much to say, but is there any kind of order to things, any kind of logic to things, would you say?
So for Brasenose at Medicine, you have 2 interviews, and in each interview you have a pre-clinical tutor and a clinical tutor, and they'll both kind of have like a discussion with you each, sort of thing. And some of them will have 2, so you might have like 2 or 3 broad questions in the thing. So the pre-clinical tutors might ask you just off the thing, like one of them went, "Why do we have a heart?" And then we spent 15 minutes talking about why we have a heart. Or they might give you a graph, and then you might spend 15 minutes discussing the graph, sort of thing, and they might then try and build that further. The clinical tutors tend to ask you, they might ask you like ethical questions. So for example, I had ones like do not resuscitate orders. Or alternatively, they might ask you about stuff. I think the other clinical tutor asked me about what sort of tests, like diagnostic tests, I would need to do in certain situations and stuff like that. So they're all kind of science linked. They don't ever ask you questions like, why would you make a good doctor? But you do get the ethical questions as well. But that's the general structure. They were supposed to be 20 minutes, but both of mine were 40 minutes in the end. Interviews, I think maybe because it was the first year, they all just overran. They're all really kind. If you don't know the question they asked, like for example, if someone went, "Why do you have a heart?" and you're like, "I haven't done cardiovascular science in biology yet," just put up your hand and be like, "I haven't done that." And then they'll just go to a different question. They have loads prepared. And so yeah, don't be afraid to say you don't know it. But yeah, that's the rough general structure of a medical interview.
So chemistry interviews, usually you have 2. So one will be like maths and physical. So the maths is kind of like graph drawing, and then the physical it's just like looking at graphs kind of again, but more related to chemistry. And then your second interview, well, at least mine was inorganic and organic. So I don't know whether they might do different combinations now, but that was mine. And it was kind of just half and half, quite separated. So they would be like, "Oh, we're moving on now to organic." Yeah, at the end of my interviews, they were like, "Okay, time's up, goodbye." And I was quite shocked because I was expecting to be asked like, "Do you have any questions?" But yeah, if they do that, like, don't worry. I was quite worried about that. Yeah. I've seen a lot of questions also asking like about whether it's based on A level. I would just make sure that you know your A level quite well, and not just like memorization, but actually understanding why things happen. And that will really help you.
Yeah, I think there are lots of questions like that, isn't there? And I was just reading through those, and yeah, I think the thing is, I would kind of just refresh. Tell me anyone if you disagree with this, but you kind of refresh your memory on some of the old A level topics, maybe. But it's not like you have to kind of with forensically relearn everything on A level. Maybe just look through a few topics, and then probably what they're going to ask you isn't exactly right. Tell me what you did in this module. It's going to be more like, here's some interesting science, a graph or something, where you might be drawing upon some of that A level knowledge, but not in a kind of direct, just memory recall way. Using that information in kind of new and exciting and interesting ways. So it's kind of like nimble, and you're thinking on your feet and thinking, "Oh, I could kind of use this and could kind of do this. Maybe I could differentiate here or something." So does anyone disagree with that, or do you think that's all right? Has anyone got anything to embellish upon? Okay, hopefully that's okay. Go on, Harish, please do.
Just in terms of more specifically for maths, I think it's or at least like what they told me when I took my interview was that it's specifically what you're required to know for the maths admissions test. Like because they've got an entire specification of those skills up on the Maths Institute site. So that may have changed, but like they told me as well, here is everything which you're expected to know. Like, okay, yeah.
Great. So that's that geography one. All right, just done that. I think I've answered that one. So I think, Matilda, you might have already answered this, but maybe just refresh our memories. Actually, you did mention this, but just briefly do it again, if that's all right. For PPL, you get what's the structure? You get one psychology and one philosophy. Is that right?
As far as I'm aware, yes. So I do experimental psychology, so I don't do philosophy at all as part of my degree, but I still had a philosophy interview. So I've seen that there were a couple different questions, like about like what types of interviews they'll have and whether they'll be combined. As far as I know, you will have a psychology interview. If you're doing PPL and you're doing psychology, you will have a psychology interview and a philosophy interview. If you're doing linguistics as well, you might have a linguistics interview, but I don't think you do. But I'm pretty sure that for all of PPL and EP, you'll have a philosophy interview and a psychology interview. And they'll be separate and not as one thing. And also, just because I've been typing out different answers, there have been a couple of different questions about what happens in the philosophy interview and what the sort of questions are like. They're not specifically about like philosophy, like knowledge or like theories in philosophy. Like you don't need to know anything about philosophy. I didn't. They call it a philosophy interview, but it's kind of more of like a rational thinking interview. It's more about like sort of you get presented with a situation, a weird situation. My philosophy interview started, my interviewer was sharing his screen on Teams and he showed me a picture of a lemon and he went, "What is this?" And I was like, "That's a lemon." And he said, "Yes, that's a good start." That was my first question of my philosophy interview, which put me at ease because I felt like I was doing quite well. But it was then just different sort of discussions about like, what that then went on to me was talking about like, imagine you're at a talk and a scientist has said, "We've just discovered that a lemon isn't a fruit." What questions would you want to ask? And talking about like, how do you define the word? What are the aspects that make? And so they were really weird, abstract kind of questions. There was another one. It was talking about like definitions of like pain and like how we can know whether or not people have different pain thresholds or if people just have different definitions for levels of pain. So it's kind of really random. It's quite difficult to prepare for, so don't worry about preparing for it. And the best way to be prepared for it is just to know that it's going to be a bit weird. You might feel a bit out of your depth. They're probably kinds of questions that you might never have been asked before. But just be willing to go anywhere with whatever questions that they ask, and don't be afraid to take your time to think about things, and just try and enjoy it, because I really enjoyed my philosophy interview, because I was like, this is so strange, this is so funny. So yeah, I hope that answers any of the questions about what the philosophy interview was like, but like you don't need to understand anything about like actual philosophy to be able to do the interview.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, they're not going to be like, "So when was Socrates born?" or something like that. So that's all good. And probably the other subjects here probably all relieved that you're not going to have a philosophy interview, so don't worry. But yeah, I think that sounds like fun. So a bunch of other questions that we'll need to get through. So in terms of length, the interviews tend to be between 20 and 30, maybe 35 minutes, but normally between 20 and 30 minutes. People often ask this: are tutors likely to ask questions based on their own specialized area? So what they do their research on? I don't think so, but does anyone here disagree? Anyone think that they did ask questions that were based on their subject area? Oscar looks like he's maybe wanting to say something.
Yeah, I got asked by, so because I worked out who my interviews were, kind of Googled what their thing was, and not always, but lots of them. So for biology, obviously, I'll ask you a question about their sort of area. So I had a couple who were really into plant biology, and their questions were generally based around plant biology, and then same with a virologist. So there were a couple of parallels I could draw there, but not exclusively. There were, scientists who were into ecology who asked about sort of ducks and their morphology. So it's not something you can 100% rely on. So it's a sort of hit and miss, but feel free to sort of have a quick Google it and sort of look what you might get asked about if you're sort of searching for something to be able to revise before you go in.
Incredible, yeah. So why not just Google it? But it's the thing is, they're not going to be like, well, you must know my specialism, so I expect you've in-depth researched all my research papers. So it won't be like that. But yeah, who knows? They might use their own research a little bit, but it will be in an accessible way. So someone asks a question about how. Hang on, I need to find it. It's quite a good question. Oh yeah. So maybe Hannah, you can answer this. Will the interviewers give you follow-up questions if they want more depth out of you? Or do you need to include all this in your first response? So I know what I'd say about that, but Hannah, what do you think about that question?
I'd say that if you when you're thinking about it, you have more depth to say. I'd suggest saying it if you kind of know that information. But if let's say that you maybe hadn't considered something, that they will ask you kind of prompting questions to lead you where they want you to kind of get to. But if you do have further thoughts on something, feel free to say it. Don't hold off on them prompting, because they don't know that you've had that thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just a kind of natural conversation, really. So it'll just kind of go like a dialogue, and if they want more from you, they'll say it. But feel free to add as much as you want first up. I would just not have a strategy. I won't be like, right, I need to say all my stuff about mitochondria now. I would just like to just let the conversation flow and see how it goes. Did anyone here get asked about their EPQ? Anyone do an EPQ and get asked about that? Sam's thinking maybe. Tell us about that, Sam.
Kind of not explicitly. So they just talk to me about science. And so I just picked my EPQ because that was the first thing that came into my head. And then we just had a discussion about that for ages. I think that question is more to get you to discuss something you're quite fascinated in. So they know that you can actually discuss it at length. And also the guy who asked the question is a genius, so he can basically answer any question that you pose, sort of thing. But yes and no at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's more questions about geography, so I'll just say a little bit about someone saying, what kind of questions will you get? I kind of feel, having sat in a few, that they tend to kind of, they might show you a picture or something to do with, some natural phenomenon, like, a waterfall or something, or it might be a graph or a piece of data that's a bit more physical. But sometimes you have photos of a shopping center or something like that, and just use it as a prompt and get you going. But geography is just so incredibly broad. It can include data, it can include some maths, it can include something that's kind of sociological. They might maybe get you to read something during the interview. So you just never know. You just got to bring your love and passion for geography to the table, and just make sure that you look carefully and analyze and think through whatever it is they're showing you, and just go for it. So I feel like because interviews are next week and the week after, that maybe it's too late in the day to worry about this, but someone's asking, would you recommend any key reading? So maybe all of you could do this. I don't know. Have any of you got any stuff that you just think, actually, this really epitomizes my love of biochemistry / psychology / medicine? Has anyone got any kind of things that they look back and think, I love that? So, but because maybe it'd be a nice kind of thing for these guys to do as part of their preparation, part of the staying calm and reminding themselves why they like this subject. I'm worried that no one seems to have anything. That's a bit worrying. Maybe they're typing it in, I don't know. So type it in the chat anyway if you've got anything.
I think for medicine, it's just keep up on day-to-day activities, like for all medical interviews, what's going on in the day, like the doctor strikes and stuff like that. Just whatever's in the news at the time, just keep up on that.
Mine's a bit more specific, but one topic that they always ask, at least in a question, or it'll be a part of a question, is sketching curves for really weird maths equations. And then I put a resource in the chat which is top tips for how to sketch those. I'd say read through that. That I think single-handedly may have landed me into Oxford. So I'd say that's a really, really helpful resource.
Thank you. Sorry, I think we've all been frantically typing stuff in. So hopefully the audience, you guys can see the answers that we've been typing in, and it's not just disappearing into some part of cyberspace that I don't know about. So hopefully you're getting some text-based answers to some of your more niche questions, as well as the ones we're kind of reading out. I don't really know how it comes through to you, but anyway, hopefully it does. All right. So someone's asked a question that's I don't know, maybe it's something that I can answer, but I'd like to hear everybody else's input as well. And that's, how can you stand out at interview? And I think the first thing to think about that is not trying to stand out. I don't think it's something you can deliberately do. You can't be like, right, I'm going to shout really loud because then they'll definitely remember me. I'm going to wear my most incredibly offensive t-shirts and show it off a lot because they'll remember me. I wouldn't think about it like that. But do you guys have any tips, any thoughts about that? How you might stand out at an interview? What do you think? Now you know the tutors. What do you think impresses them most? Anyone got any comments? Just unmute if you do. Harish.
Yeah, I think after kind of speaking to my tutors, I think they get really annoyed if people just aren't talking to them, which is why I kind of say them over and over again. Just kind of talk through your answers. Because, like, say that I'm in a tutorial, I'm not sure if they will in an interview, but like I'll just be talking out loud, and then I'll say something which is not right, and then they'll just immediately come in and then they'll be like, oh no, that's not right. So I think a person who just works well with them, try to kind of not like form a connection with them and that try to be their mate, but like try and actually work with them, and then make sure that you're a person who they know is like a teachable person and that they can kind of see. So just try and be like really conducive, and then try and respond well to all of their hints and their tips. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm determined to get the Q&A box down to 0. All right, thank you very much, Harish. Anyone else got any feelings about that? Anyone spoke to tutors about what they're looking for? Maybe haven't, but if there is any more insights, let us know. Okay. Someone saying, to prepare for the philosophy interviews, should we look at philosophy interview examples on YouTube? Yeah, why not? It's unlikely to do you any harm. I wouldn't do it if it's by some crackpot company trying to make money by getting people to pay for like sample philosophy interviews. But there's definitely some on the kind of Oxford website, so you could do that. I can't do any harm, but I would just remember what Matilda said about it being a kind of thinking skills exercise rather than a special like secret way of philosophizing. It won't be like that. So yeah,
I would say, like, with the philosophy interview, if I remember right, I'm pretty sure we got an email like a couple of days before that basically said in it, don't worry about preparing, you can't. They don't. And that, so that's not to like scare you and be like you can't be prepared, because there are obviously bits you can do to prepare, and it probably wouldn't hurt to have a look at some examples of what the like interviews look like. But it's really like, I just really want to stress that like the philosophy interview is really not something to like worry about too much, to spend too much energy on. It's a bit of a curveball. And I remember being a bit confused as to why I was going to have a philosophy interview when I wasn't studying philosophy. And obviously you want to try and be as prepared as possible, but like it is okay. So have a look if you want to, but like don't worry about it too much and focus more on like thinking about your like sort of your critical thinking skills of like, what do you do in an essay? How do you like critically analyze things or stuff like that? And just practicing those kinds of like just thinking about things, and just have weird discussions with people. Go up to someone in your family and just ask them some kind of, I don't know, random question and just talk about it. Like that's probably more useful than maybe watching the interviews.
Yeah, totally agree. And hopefully that answers another question, which is that just been asked about specific philosophical concepts. Hopefully you're more reassured about that now. I had a question for Amber. Where is it? Amber. Oh, it's here somewhere. Oh yeah. Were you allowed, Amber, any resources in your chemistry interview? For instance, calculator, data sheet, and periodic table?
I personally didn't have any of that. I didn't take any in with me. I don't know if you're allowed or not. Not
I
too
mean, I
sure.
just think it won't help. It'll just be like there won't
Yeah,
be
I didn't need any of
the
them.
atomic weight of
So
carbon or something. So yeah,
if you want them with you, if you're allowed, then have them. But I didn't, and I didn't need them.
yeah. It's just not like that. It's not like they interrogate you and demand various atomic weights and things. So it's more based on your ability to think things through. Really. Does anyone have felt like they needed a calculator or anything else in their interview? Harish, no. If Harish didn't use one, then you're all good. I would say. So yeah, I don't think so. Go on, Hannah.
Yeah, no. So for my interviews, I had a maths question in each, and in my Univ one, they stated very clearly that I was not allowed to use a calculator. And then in my Brasenose one, I was trying to figure it out and trying to it was like to a nuts power or something. And they went, you can use a calculator, you know. And I was like, no, I did not know this. And that would have saved me a bit of time. So I think maybe just ask if you're not sure.
Yeah, and I guess everyone will have one on their computer or desktop or something. But yeah, generally, I don't think you're supposed to be primed with your scientific calculator, but who knows? It's not something to worry about. All right, so I've answered that one, data sheet one. Oscar's typing an answer still. Are you about biology tutors? That's fine. You carry on. Yes, I have recorded this, and I hope to put it up on YouTube. And then you can watch it at your leisure and all the fantastic comments that we made. So I'll probably just email that around. I'm not sure if we'll be able to see the questions. I think I can record it in a way that will happen. I'm not sure. I think we've asked a lot of these questions. We've got just 9 remaining, but I think we've in one way or another answered most of them. Just have a look in the chat. Oh, that's something else. Okay, so I think we're kind of drawing to an end. I feel like we've answered most of the questions, at least that are still there. So I think what I'd like now, just to finish off, is all 6 of you just to give us your condensed single sentence of advice you would have given yourself when you were in year 13 about to have interviews. So I guess kind of around late November. What would you say? And the first person to unmute gets to say the first tip, and then we'll go around everyone. And by the end, you'll probably be scraping the barrel a bit, but we'll do that to finish. Oscar.
I'd say just make sure you're practicing talking through your thoughts really clearly in a nice structured way, and make sure you're not afraid, even if you've only got basic small ideas to start with. You're articulating these and letting them help you, letting them take you through any parts of the question you're struggling with.
Enjoy it. If you get in, you'll be doing this sort of thing every week or twice a week. And if you don't get in, you've had a 20-40 minute conversation with someone speaking about what they're an expert on, which is quite exciting and fun. So just relax and enjoy it.
I'd say expect the unexpected, go with the flow, and say all of your thoughts out loud in the interview.
I'd say listen to what they tell you. If they've given you some more information, they want that to inform your answer and kind of where you're going to go from there. So just make sure that you listen to what you get told.
A lot of mine have been taken, but I'd say again, talk to them as much as possible, and then it's a lot easier for them to help you if you tell them what's running through your mind.
Just don't be scared. Don't be scared of getting anything wrong. Don't be scared of the tutors, because they're actually all so nice, and they're there to help you. Like, yeah, they're just there for you. If you don't understand anything, just give them whatever you think, and then they'll just build on that like tiny idea that you have in your mind, or they'll lead you down a different path. But yeah, just don't be afraid.
Marvelous. I've been doing these kind of sessions either face to face or online for years, and I've also sat in loads of interviews, hundreds of interviews, and listened to the tutors interact and then make their decisions afterwards. And basically, all the advice that I ever give out was perfectly encapsulated in those six individual pieces, those six individual nuggets that we've just given out there. So that's everything I would have said as well. Which is brilliant. Only they said it much more articulate and a much more impressive way. So that's superb advice. Thanks very much for being amazing. And yeah, do remember what I said at the beginning. Just go for it. See what happens. You deserve it. You deserve to have an Oxbridge interview. We have single-handedly, we have picked you out and said you're going to be good enough for an interview. So congratulations. And remember, all of the applicants were absolutely amazing. We've picked you. It is actually really hard to get through to the interview stage. So you're incredible and you're amazing. And you just got to kind of try and show that. Just try and be as relaxed and interested in what they say as possible. Be on the edge of your seat rather than being kind of passive and just kind of letting it wash over you. Just be part of the conversation, and that's what they want, because they're always thinking about what you'd be like in a tutorial, as a few of you, as Sam was saying earlier on. So do your best, and then if it works out, if you get an offer, work hard, please, because it's heartbreaking if you don't get your conditions, and just have an amazing time. Oh, hello, Evie. Was that Evie? Oh, I recognise Evie just by her fringe. I'm impressed with myself. And yeah, if you do get an offer, please let us know if you're going to take it. And then we do this offer holder day, right? Which is in March, where we get you all to come and you all have a look round and you meet some of these guys in person. And it's just such a great and emotional day. And we already start forming this kind of amazing community that we have here. So yeah, we basically, if you get an offer, we will do lots to try and make you love Brasenose as much as we love you. So thanks very much for joining in. Thanks for the guest appearance from Evie. I really enjoyed that. And then Oscar, Matilda, Harish, Sam, Hannah, and Amber, you're incredible. And thanks for all your great questions. It's one of my greatest ever achievements that we got the Q&A box down to 0, and then someone's put another question in. Oh, thanks. Thank you, Anonymous. We appreciate it. We love you too. And yeah, best of luck with everything. I'll email you later and tell you where the YouTube link is if you want to rewatch some of the highlights. Maybe I should make a highlights package. I don't know. But thanks very much. You've all been amazing. And good night.